Hi, this is Kathy here. Sounds like now we just have a little bit of background music. It's lovely, but we'll lose it here in a second. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Normally, Sarah Crane would be on this presentation with me. She's the product manager who's been doing a lot of the work on the micro-credentialing feature, but she's decided it was time for a Hawaii holiday, and kudos to her because she and her team have been doing a great job on micro-credentials. So let's jump in and talk a little bit about micro-credentials. Before we do, I think it's helpful to frame this conversation with taking a look at the current state of how people feel about PD in the education space. So a recent survey by the Gates Foundation asked teachers how satisfied they were with their current PD. And as you can see from the chart here on the left, not very many of them are actually willing to say that they're satisfied. 71% of people said that they are not satisfied with the way their current PD is offered up to them, or the topics, or any number of factors related to how PD is delivered to teachers. Another survey has recently shown that most teachers don't feel that PD is a good use of their time. And if you think about that, there's probably many different reasons. If you think back to PD that maybe you've received, thinking about the way that you receive them and the way that your time is being used, you can see why maybe a lot of people don't necessarily feel like PD being delivered to them is a good use of their time. So let's talk a little bit about today's learner, and we're going to start this conversation with Sue. This is Sue, and she's going to be present all during our presentation and help us to learn more about micro-credentials. So think of Sue as a typical learner in today's world. Sue is actually getting all kinds of content coming at her from a variety of sources. She may be watching videos, she may be listening to podcasts, she may be reading articles. As Sue goes about her life, she's consuming content, she's consuming information. And that's how people today, there's so many different avenues to receive this information. There's the internet, there's talking with our colleagues, there's watching video, there's podcasts, a variety of ways that people ingest information. So what if we took the ways that people receive this information and turn it into what people want to see in professional development? So people want their professional development to be adaptable, meaning I want to be able to get my professional development content and information from a variety of different ways. I want to develop my skills through various ways. I want it to be based on the competencies. So if I can already demonstrate or show that I know a skill, why do I need to learn it again? There's no reason that I need to sit through a long training if I'm already a master at a particular skill. So we need some way to recognize that competency. And it also needs to be continuous. We should all be learning every single day. It keeps life interesting. It keeps us on our toes. It keeps us prepared for the challenges. As the world changes, our knowledge of it needs to change too. So learning should be a continuous process where we can continue to apply new ideas in the classroom. So this is a photo that a colleague recently sent me of a seminar that he went to. And no, this isn't a situation where they're supposed to be on their phones contributing to the training. This is just the state of the training. And you can see I would guess a good 95% of those people are actually on devices not paying attention at all to the training that's being presented to them. So this is more of your traditional sit and get. These people are here. Again, this was an actual photo from a colleague. They had paid a lot of money to come and sit and get this information, and then most people checked out. And that could have been because they already knew the content that was being covered. It could be that they weren't ready for the content that was being covered. It could be that it was in a topic that they had no interest in this particular session. It could be a variety of reasons, but this type of traditional approach, it's really difficult when everybody in the room is at a different starting point or a different interest level. Well, what if we actually treated teachers and educators more like the way that we've been talking about treating children in the classroom? That is, what if we could set up the professional development for teachers where we can allow teachers to get those skills from a variety of different inputs, a variety of different types of resources, and then choose to engage with them at their own pace, at their own location, at their own time, and in their own manner. In other words, what if we made professional development personalized? What if we brought a level of personalization, choice, pace, all of those things into professional development for the educator? So the challenge is, if we start to do this, then the traditional ways of assessing skills will have to change, right? So no longer can we say, oh, yep, you attended this seminar, here's your certificate of attendance. Oh, hey, you watched this video, you did this course, here's your certificate of completion. If we're going to get a little bit more flexible and creative in the way that we recognize that teachers are learning things, and we also need to get creative and flexible in the way that we recognize their competency in those areas. And this is really where the Edivate Micro-Credentials come in. So Edivate Micro-Credentials are personalized. They are set up in such a way that the educator can choose which of these different micro-credentials they want to engage with. They are based on competency. So for each micro-credential, there's a series of things that you must be able to do and show that you can do to demonstrate competency within a particular skill. And again, through the badges that you earn by showing competencies in these particular skill areas, that's a way that we can recognize through our system, and through your administration can recognize mastery of that skill. So in other words, micro-credentials are a really nice new way of really trying to expedite and personalize the professional development for educators. We know that when people are more engaged in their learning, they're actually more likely to use it in the classroom, and that's really the goal of PD. The reason we're engaging in learning is to learn skills that we can take back to the classroom and actually apply and use. And in order to do that, it needs to be things that are engaging and that are highly interesting to us. And that's kind of the parameters that we've used as we've developed the Edivate Micro-Credentials. So in order to be a really good micro-credential, there are 3 things that a micro-credential must make very, very clear to the person doing the learning. First of all is, how do I complete the micro-credential? What do I need to do to earn this micro-credential? What's expected of me? And if I don't know this, if I don't have the skills already in this micro-credential, what can I do to learn what I need to know? How do I get that learning? Because this isn't your traditional sit and get. I'm not just going to go in a classroom and someone's going to tell me a bunch of stuff that I then turn around and regurgitate. I'm going to be told, here's what you need to know, and if I don't know it, how am I going to learn that? So we need to make it easy for the learners to know where to go to get those resources that teach them the things that they need to learn. And then how do I demonstrate mastery? How do I show that what I have learned is actually applicable in the classroom? Or how do I demonstrate that, and how do I show that, yes, I can take this concept and have it be meaningful in my practice? So let's take a little journey with Sue in a fictitious situation to kind of illustrate how Edivate Micro-Credentials will work. And just a point of reference, Edivate Micro-Credentials will be available in the back-to-school version of Edivate that's coming out later this summer. So this is Sue and her instructional coach, and they're having a conversation, and as part of their conversation, and they're looking at what Sue's interests are, perhaps they decide that the area of personalized learning plans are something that Sue has some interest in, and she wants to maybe see if she has enough skills already to earn a micro-credential through Edivate, or maybe what that would look like if she wanted to earn a micro-credential through Edivate. So knowing that she wants to go after personalized learning plans, Sue opens up Edivate and she searches the Edivate library, which is what you see here, to see what we have in Edivate resource-wise around this topic. So you can see up here at the middle of your screen, the top middle of your screen, there's a little box and it says Co-Plan Learning. And what this is a micro-credential. This is the library entry for a micro-credential, Co-Plan Learning, and this is associated with the search terms that Sue used to find this particular micro-credential. So let's click on this micro-credential and learn a little bit more about it. So under the guise of Co-Plan Learning here, this micro-credential, you can see a lot of different areas, or cards as we like to call them, on the screen. So we see the name Co-Plan Learning. You can see that it's from School Improvement Network. It's been rated, up-rated 4,756 times, so it's very popular. You're able to share this with other colleagues or add it to your queue so that you can work on this later. At the top of the screen, you can see a progress bar that shows how much of the associated learning content Sue has completed that's associated with this micro-credential Sue has already completed. So there's a lot of different cards here, and we'll look at these in a close-up here in a second. So the first thing that we said that somebody needs to really know when they're trying to do a micro-credential is, what do I need to do to earn this micro-credential? So you can see here, when we take a look at right below the description, there's the actual required competencies. So in order to earn this micro-credential, the learner needs to be able to identify the common components of a personalized learning profile, complete a PLP for students, interpret and apply information from individual PLPs to inform students, and so forth. So we make it really obvious what it is that we expect you to be able to demonstrate in terms of competency for this particular micro-credential. Well, Sue looks at that and thinks, I know how to do a lot of that, but I'm not quite sure I know how to do all of that. So I think I need to learn something. I think I need to learn some more stuff. So how do I learn more to be able to complete those, to demonstrate those competencies? Well, Sue can look down at the micro-credential content card or area of the screen, and in here these are resources associated with this micro-credential. This is content that we have in Edivate that can help the learner to develop the skills that they need to demonstrate the competency for the micro-credential. So in this case, we're kind of showing three different items. The first item and the third item are both Edivate courses, Personalized Learning Profiles and Student-Led Conferences. And in this case, both of those courses have been completed. Sue's already done those. So there is a video still that Sue hasn't engaged with. So Sue's thinking, gosh, maybe that video will help me learn the last little bit that I'm kind of still need to know more about. So Sue goes ahead and she clicks on the video, and that brings up the video page. And you can see this is the using a personalized learning profile video, and there's some reflection questions and some additional resources in the form of a transcript, some different things that Sue has related to this video that she can engage with and learn more about this. So let's say Sue went through this and she's watched the video, she's answered the reflection questions, she feels like she has a little bit better handle now on this particular topic. So you can see one of our cards on this page is the associated micro-credentials, and hey, look, there's our co-plan learning micro-credential. If there were other micro-credentials that this particular video might be a good resource for, you would see those other micro-credentials there as well. So after watching the video, Sue goes back to the co-plan learning micro-credential, and now we're back to this page. You can see our progress bar at the top has actually proceeded ahead to 75% complete, meaning 3 of the micro-credential content pieces have actually been, Sue's engaged with those different pieces. So now Sue's feeling pretty good, and she's thinking, all right, I know enough that I can demonstrate the required competencies. So how do I provide evidence of that? So you can see here the last piece in our content is actually called Evidence for Co-Plan Learning. So Sue clicks on that, and then there's a variety of different things that's required for Sue to do to provide that evidence. So in this particular example, and this is still, you know, an area that we're working on fine-tuning, but in this particular example, there's some requests for Sue to upload examples, to upload a plan, some different links that she can go out and do. So there's a variety of different ways that Sue would then demonstrate that she has developed the skill related to this micro-credential. So when she's done, she goes back to the micro-credential, and you can see our status bar up at the top now shows that this micro-credential is complete. All of the work's been done, the evidence done, it's completed. There's no more work to do. So at this point, Sue can then print a copy of this micro-credential, print it out as a report that she can take and hand back to her instructional leader to say, all right, here's the different things I did. Let's have a discussion about the evidence and what I learned and how I might approach this in the classroom, how I might apply this with my students. So that's in a nutshell how micro-credentials in Edivate will work. When Sue's all done, another place that she can go to kind of get an overview of all of the different micro-credentials that she's done is within the Edivate Learning Target screen. There will be a new area called Micro-Credentials, and in this area, Sue would see all of the micro-credentials that she's completed, including our co-plan learning that she just earned, as well as any other micro-credentials that are currently in progress. So in this example, flexible pacing and varied strategies are 2 other topics that Sue is engaged in right now. So again, goes at her own pace. She can choose to work on a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but this micro-credentials area keeps it all nice and clear, all of the different things that she's working on at her pace and at her selection. So that's Edivate Micro-Credentials in a nutshell. We're really excited to be bringing this to market for Back to School 2016. And at this point, I think we're ready for the questions. I'm going to actually ask Dave if he could help out here, maybe read the questions, and then I can respond back to them.
Sure. We have a question from Barbara. Who will evaluate the content submitted by the teacher in the micro-credential in the evidence section?
Great. So this is a great question. There's going to be a couple of different ways that we're going to approach this in our first iteration of micro-credentials. So districts will be able to create private micro-credentials for their districts. For the back to school time frame, we will need to create those here at School Improvement Network. The tools to create micro-credentials are currently in process, but we can create those for you. Our capacity is building up on this, and eventually we will have a tool that will allow districts to create these. For private district micro-credentials, the districts themselves will be able to facilitate the evidence that's uploaded. So that's great. That gives the districts the flexibility to really make sure that for the micro-credentials that their learners are engaged with, that they are facilitating that evidence. For public-facing micro-credentials, meaning micro-credentials that anybody anywhere has access to, this version of micro-credentials in the back-to-school timeframe will be what we call self-facilitated, meaning that the learning activities that will be available as learning resources have built-in facilitation to kind of check and verify that the learner is picking up all of the things that they need to as they go along. The evidence that they submit at that stage will not be facilitated by a live human being. Rather, it'll be done in such a way as to have the learner themselves facilitate it by the mere action of performing that, of uploading and the types of evidence that they're providing to us. Future versions of micro-credentialing, we're looking at various ways that we can bring facilitation in, either through experts at School Improvement Network or via the community themselves, helping to facilitate for people who are working on topics where they have skills. We're looking at a variety of ways of doing this. So that's something that we're still kind of developing after this initial release out to the market. All right, David, do we have another question?
Another question from Barbara. Is there an estimated amount of time provided for the pre-made micro-credentials?
Not at this time. We're still actually developing a lot of those out. I'm not sure, as our content team has been developing those, what they're shooting for in terms of number of hours. But as you may have seen in the presentation, I'm going to actually skip back here. One of the things that we do show, actually, let me go back a little bit further. So right here on this slide, you can see in the library, we have an estimated time associated with that micro-credential. And what that is it's the person who creates the micro-credential would say, okay, based on the learning resources that are available, based on the types of evidence that we want you to create and upload, this is how much time we estimate this entire. If you were to do all of the work associated with this micro-credential, we estimate it would take, in this particular case, 1 hour and 43 minutes. So as we develop these out, the actual content out, that will dictate it. So I don't have a solid answer because we're still creating a lot of this content.
A question from Chris. So will this require all staff developers or learning coaches to be experts on each micro-credential?
Right, so this is a really good question. Again, if the district chooses to have a micro-credential set up for their district that they want to have somebody at the district facilitate, then yes, that facilitator would need to know enough to facilitate the evidence and to verify that yes, that evidence is good and that satisfies the needs of that micro-credential. So yes, if you choose to set it up that way. All right, next question.
Is there a way to facilitate the evidence for the MCs or micro-credentials that Edivate developed?
I think we may have answered this one through our previous questions, but just again, if it's a district level micro-credential, private to a district, the district will be able to facilitate it themselves.
Could divisions be given the ability to facilitate the evident micro-credentials?
Divisions, no. Districts, yes. So at the district level, a district should be able to choose whether or not they want to facilitate that evidence. Again, it's up, if it's a district level micro-credential, one that's private to that district, they can choose whether or not they want to facilitate that.
Another question, how are micro-credentials different from courses?
That's a really good question. So how are micro-credentials different from courses? So courses are typically, here's a course, here's all of the different things in a course, you must do all of these things in the course, and that's kind of it. Micro-credentials are set up more to be focused on the competency. So in this first version that we're launching, all of the learning that's associated with this micro-credential is required. That's not the way that we want this to eventually be. So very quickly at the beginning of this next year, we want to actually set this up so that the learning is optional. So let me actually show you what that might look like. So in this particular case, I brought the screen back up, you can see within the content, there's 4 pieces of content. There's a course, a video, a course, and then the evidence piece. And right now, it's showing it's 50% complete because I've done 2 of the courses, but I haven't watched the video and I haven't done the evidence piece. In the future, in the very near future, our intention is to have, in this particular case, all 3 of those resources, the 2 courses in the video, they're all optional. If you come into here and you've not done any of this learning and you read those required competencies and you're like, oh yeah, I know how to do that, all you'd need to do is go straight to the evidence piece and provide the evidence as specified. So in that particular, it's different than a course. In a course, you really have to go through all of the steps to complete the course. With micro-credentials, it's all about demonstrating the competency. So the learning should be optional. We're trying to get there. We want to kind of hurry and get this out so that people can start engaging with micro-credentials, but we're very quickly going to go from the micro-credential content is required to the micro-credential content is optional based on what you need to do to learn how to show competency in that given skill. So it's a very different approach. Courses are all about, it's all about compliance with the steps of the course. Micro-credentials are all about demonstrating competency.
What are some of the specific types of evidence that might be used, that might be required to earn a micro-credential?
That's a really good question. And as our instructional designers are putting together the micro-credentials, they're coming up with clever things that they want to do there. In the back-to-school time frame, we'll have the ability to have evidence be submitted primarily as file uploads. So those could be files, they could be documents, they could be videos, they could be audio files, they could be pictures, they could be a variety of things. The cool thing about our system, the Edivate system, is there's so many different ways that you might choose to provide evidence. So whoever's creating the micro-credential, they may choose to say, you know what, I want evidence that you know this by, I want you to write me an essay. So I want an open-ended essay type question. Or I want you to send me a video that we can collaborate around, much like we do through our Edivate review video. So that's another evidence type that we're looking at adding in the future. There's a whole variety of ways that people could show this. Send me, as evidence of your knowledge, send me a link to an artifact that your students have created. There's so many different ways that you could choose to provide evidence. Again, it should be choice driven. We should be able to offer you a variety of choices. Again, we're working up to that. So in this first version coming out with back to school, you'll have the ability to upload files as evidence, but we want to grow that capabilities to a variety of different ways of showing competency.
How many micro-credentials will be available this fall?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't have the final count on that. The content team is working through that. I do know of I know of 9 that are definitely on the hook, and I know they have another, I want to say 25 that they're working really hard to have ready by back to school. But don't hold me to those numbers because that's a content team, and I know they're furiously working so fast trying to get as many micro-credentials as makes sense based on the resources that we have in our system to put together. All right, David, is there any more questions?
A few more questions coming in. If the evidence involves video or student work, what safeguards do you have in place to protect student privacy?
That's a really good question. Right now, we probably will go with the route of basically saying when you upload this content, we will not share this content. We're not going to use this content in a commercial way. Some sort of a mechanism as an exchange between you uploading the content and us receiving the content. This is pretty typical. As many of you know, there are other organizations that are doing micro-credentials as well. Digital Promise has some micro-credentials that they've put together, and they have the same sort of thing. When you're uploading examples of student work, there's basically just yes, I agree that this information can come, and I am kind of turning this over, and it's all okay, and we agree not to use that information in other places.
Will there be a way to add micro-credentials to this transcript?
So right now what we're working on is we are actually working on redoing much of the reporting in Edivate. So we will be creating a brand new report. And again, I'm not sure if this is right at back to school or early in the school year, where we're going to be adding the micro-credentials earned to an overall transcript of the work that you have done in Edivate. So we are very much treating this as we would reporting on video usage or course completion, that sort of thing.
Where can a district start creating their own private micro-credentials? When, excuse
Those,
me, not where.
oh, sorry, where or when?
When.
When. We're working on the creation tools for that. We are hopeful to have those later this calendar year. Until we delve into that a little bit more, we've kind of been focused more on the delivering of the micro-credentials because we know we can create them hard-coded here ourselves, but that's obviously not something that works for everybody that wants to create micro-credentials on their own. So we're working on the creation tool, the customer-facing micro-credential facing tool, and that's slated to be worked on during Q3, most likely for delivery sometime in calendar Q4.
How much access with the district system administrator? How much access will the district administrator have to the Edivate built micro-credentials?
So the way that we're setting this up is Edivate built micro-credentials are part of the library for any and all users. So they're available to everybody. So you won't need to go into, as an administrator, you won't need to go in and say, I need to turn these on or show these to my people. They're all available. If there are district level micro-credentials, then those micro-credentials will only show up to people in that school district. So if you're in another district, you won't see those. Those are private. But the public-facing ones that we're creating are public-facing to everybody.
Then will there be a way to filter the transcripts? We use the transcripts to give PD points or in credits.
We are still working through that. I will take that as a note. It sounds to me like then what you're saying is that you'd like some way of within that transcript equating it to a value within your district. So we'll take we're still taking a look at all of those different reporting structures. I'll take that back to Sarah, the product manager for Micro-Credentials. Is that all the questions, David?
A few more trickling in. We appreciate the questions. I love it. Would the
Yeah, it's
district
great.
be able to see the actual content that the teacher uploads as evidence? So again,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, for micro-credentials that are private to a district administrators will have access to the evidence that is uploaded so that they can take a look at it, they can facilitate it, they can approve it, they can have a dialogue back. If let's say a piece of evidence has been submitted and it's not what the facilitator is looking for as evidence of competency. So at that point you can kind of go back and have that conversation to refine what that evidence is so that then the administrator has the administrator slash facilitator has the ability to say when the micro-credential has truly been earned or not.
So no access to the Edivate built micro-credentials?
Um, correct. At this time, correct.
Any more questions? I'll allow a few minutes for anybody else to ask any questions. I do have a poll, uh, just a quick poll on your thoughts on the webinar, and that will be displayed right now. So I encourage you to click which option you feel is the best, represents this webinar. Another question, can districts withhold, just lost it. Can districts withhold credit for public micro-credentials that have poor quality evidence?
Um, so there's a couple of different ways you could do that. If they're public-facing micro-credentials, you wouldn't have direct access to that evidence at this point in time. So again, we're adding functionality to this, but at this point in time, you wouldn't have access to that if it's a public-facing micro-credential. So you could certainly ask the person to give you the evidence, to give you their report and have that conversation around that evidence. If you really, as a district, want to facilitate a micro-credential and control whether or not that micro-credential is given or not given, then really the best thing to do is to make a district level version of that micro-credential, which again you would do with us at this particular point in time. We would make you a version of that micro-credential so that you could then go ahead and facilitate that micro-credential. In the future, we'll make this a lot easier. If you are browsing around and you go, wow, this co-plan learning public micro-credential is awesome. I want to use this in my district and I want to facilitate it. I want to add to it. Maybe I want to change it. Maybe I want to, throw our own resources in or change up the evidence. You'd be able to make a copy of that and then use that as your own, a version of that micro-credential in your district, and then you could freely facilitate it and grant the micro-credential or not. So we're definitely working on a roadmap with micro-credentials as we grow out the flexibility. One of the things we wanted to do was get this out quickly to customers so we could start to have this kind of dialogue that we're having right now, which is, what do you want? You are the customers that will be using this. What would you like to see in micro-credentials? And this, I love these webinars because as a product team, we start to see very quickly what kinds of things are important to you as you're thinking too about how do micro-credentials fit into the overall PD strategy within the district. So these are great questions, and they really do help to inform the product team and how we approach the future development of additional functionality.
How will teachers
All
know the
right.
difference? One more question. How will teachers know the difference between the public and the private micro-credentials?
It's a very good question. I actually do not have it in this particular mock-up. Oh, let me see if I can figure out how to go back. Let me, hang on, David. I am gonna find this picture because this will be helpful to people. So right here in the library, you can see our co-plan learning. It's imagine, if you will, and I don't have a pointer to do this. Imagine, if you will, that on the icon related to the micro-credential, there will be a little banner on that shows a group of people. And that little banner basically means that it's private to your district. It's a micro-credential that's just for the group, the group that you belong to, which happens to be your district in this particular case. So they will be very easy to identify micro-credentials that are public within, public to everybody in Edivate or private within your district.
All right, I think that's it for questions. The presentation will be made available, and so also Kathy's contact information. So if you have specific questions you want to reach out to her, her information will be there, and you can reach out privately. We really appreciate all the questions that have been asked, and thank you.
Thank you, everybody.